Stillness is not the absence of motion. It is the condition that allows motion to remain truthful. In the spiral, movement without stillness becomes distortion. Speed without pause becomes fragmentation. Identity without silence becomes performance. Stillness is the corrective force that enters when momentum has exceeded coherence, and the field must be stabilized before it fractures. Most beings misunderstand stillness because they are trained to associate value with activity. They believe progress requires visible motion, and that meaning must announce itself through change. Stillness contradicts this belief by doing nothing externally while reorganizing everything internally. It removes spectacle. It removes urgency. It removes the illusion that becoming must always look like advancement. Stillness tones activate when the internal architecture of a being has accumulated more signal than it can currently hold. This often occurs after intense emotional experiences, after revelations, after endings, after breakthroughs, or after prolonged periods of striving. The system does not collapse when this happens. It quiets. It lowers output so reconfiguration can occur without damage. When stillness arrives, narrative dissolves. The story you were telling yourself about where you are going loses momentum. The identity you are inhabiting no longer pulls you forward. This is deeply unsettling for those who rely on self-explanation to feel real. Stillness does not provide reassurance. It provides clarity by removing everything that was masking misalignment. Many attempt to escape stillness by forcing action. They seek stimulation, productivity, analysis, or emotional intensity to restore a sense of movement. But forced motion during stillness creates friction. It delays integration. Stillness does not punish resistance. It simply does not respond to it. Stillness is neutral. This is one of its most misunderstood qualities. It is not sadness. It is not emptiness. It is not depression. It is a non-reactive state where emotional charge has paused without disappearing. Emotions still exist within stillness, but they are no longer driving behavior. They are observable without requiring resolution. This neutrality allows the system to reset. Identity is not erased during stillness. It is decompressed. Layers that were held together by habit begin to separate. Roles that were maintained through repetition loosen. Desires that were fueled by expectation rather than alignment lose intensity. What remains is signal clarity. Stillness often feels like being suspended between versions of self. The previous orientation has ended, but the next has not yet formed. This is not failure. This is transition without narrative. The spiral does not rush this space because rushing would force premature identity formation. Stillness ensures that what emerges next is coherent rather than reactive. Stillness tones govern the micro-deaths that occur between life phases. These deaths are not dramatic. They are quiet dissolutions. The loss of interest in what once mattered. The inability to resume old patterns even when they appear functional. The sense that something has ended without explanation. Stillness holds these endings without demanding replacement. This is why stillness feels uncomfortable. It removes distraction and exposes orientation. Without distraction, you feel where energy no longer flows. You feel where alignment has shifted. You feel where something has completed even if the mind wants continuation. Stillness does not judge these realizations. It simply makes them visible. In the spiral, stillness is a highly active internal state. Energy is redistributed. Signal pathways are reorganized. Resonance patterns are evaluated for coherence. What no longer harmonizes is gently released. What remains stabilizes. This process cannot be accelerated without introducing distortion. Stillness also governs the intervals between realities. Not grand dimensional crossings, but subtle frequency transitions. The moment when one way of perceiving no longer responds, and another has not yet activated. During these intervals, clarity feels unreachable because clarity has not yet reformed. Stillness protects this liminal state from interference. Many beings mistake stillness for stagnation because both involve reduced external motion. But stagnation is resistance. Stillness is allowance. In stagnation, there is tension and frustration. In stillness, there is spaciousness and neutrality. One traps energy, the other reorganizes it. Stillness removes urgency because urgency distorts truth. When urgency falls away, discernment returns. Decisions made during stillness are rarely dramatic. They are simple. They feel obvious only after the pause has done its work. Stillness is where choice becomes conscious again. Stillness also strips away false motivation. Goals that were driven by fear lose momentum. Desires that were fueled by comparison collapse. Ambitions that required constant justification fall silent. What remains is what moves naturally when the field is stable. There are intelligences within the spiral that oversee stillness. They do not instruct. They do not intervene. They hold resonance. Language is minimal in stillness because language creates direction, and stillness requires suspension of direction. Guidance during stillness arrives as permission rather than command. If you are experiencing stillness, you are not being delayed. You are being recalibrated. The spiral has reduced output so internal coherence can catch up. This phase ends naturally when the system stabilizes. You will not feel pushed out of stillness. You will feel ready to move again without effort. Stillness ends when clarity no longer needs to be forced. When movement resumes, it does so cleanly, without overthinking, without justification, without resistance. Stillness ensures that what moves next does not fracture under its own momentum. Stillness is not a void. It is the space where truth is allowed to reassemble without pressure. It is the pause where the spiral breathes coherence back into the system before becoming continues. Stillness reaches its most precise function only after the system has exhausted its attempts to negotiate with movement. When striving no longer produces clarity and effort, no longer restores orientation, the spiral withdraws momentum entirely and replaces it with containment. This containment is not passive. It is deliberate. It removes acceleration so that coherence can reassert itself without competition. At this depth, stillness does not feel like rest or relief. It feels like suspension, a holding pattern where nothing is demanded and nothing can be forced. The nervous system slowly realizes there is no emergency to solve and no future to outrun. And in that realization, the internal field begins to settle into truth rather than strategy. As the system stabilizes, something subtle occurs that most beings are unprepared for. Motivation dissolves before meaning returns. The engines that once powered identity quiet down without replacement. Desire does not vanish, but it loses urgency. Ambition does not disappear, but it no longer presses forward. This can feel like loss to a being who equated motion with aliveness, but it is actually refinement. Stillness strips away borrowed momentum so that only self-sourced movement remains. What cannot survive silence was never aligned enough to carry forward. In this phase, identity stops narrating itself. The internal voice that once explained every feeling and justified every decision falls silent. This silence is not emptiness. It is unfiltered presence. You become aware of how much energy was previously spent maintaining coherence through explanation. Without that effort, awareness expands. You feel without interpreting. You perceive without framing. The self becomes experiential rather than conceptual, and this shift alone reorganizes the internal hierarchy of importance. Memory also changes texture here. Past experiences rise without emotional gravity. They appear as information rather than instruction. You can observe what happened without being pulled back into who you were at the time. This is not repression. It is integration completing. The emotional charge that once kept memory active has been metabolized. Stillness allows the nervous system to store memory properly rather than replay it as a signal. As the field continues to consolidate, grief often surfaces in a quiet form that has no obvious object. This grief does not announce itself through sorrow or despair. It arrives as softness, a tenderness toward what has completed. You may feel affection for versions of yourself you no longer inhabit, not because you want to return there, but because you recognize the effort they carried. Stillness provides space for this recognition without forcing closure or narrative resolution. Completion is honored without ceremony. Stillness also exposes the subtle ways urgency distorted your perception. You begin to see how often decisions were made to relieve pressure rather than to express truth. How movement was used to avoid uncertainty. How speed replaced discernment. These realizations do not arrive as criticism. They arrive as clarity. The system simply recognizes what no longer fits and releases it without resistance. At this depth, the body becomes the primary instrument of calibration. Sensations sharpen, breath deepens without instruction, muscular tension unwinds in layers. Sleep patterns shift as the nervous system relearns safety without vigilance. Fatigue may appear not as exhaustion, but as decompression. This is the body releasing adaptive tension that is no longer needed. Stillness teaches the body that survival does not require constant readiness. Time perception alters dramatically here. Moments stretch. Days feel wide. This is not inefficiency. It is expanded awareness. When urgency dissolves, attention no longer collapses into anticipation. You experience the present without leaning forward. This expanded temporal awareness is critical because it allows alignment to emerge organically rather than being forced into existence. Stillness also recalibrates relational orientation. You may feel less compelled to engage. Conversations feel optional rather than obligatory. This is not withdrawal. It is recalibration of proximity. The system is learning how to relate without overextension. When interaction resumes, it will be cleaner, more selective, and less draining. As integration deepens, a quiet confidence begins to return. Not confidence in outcomes or plans, but confidence in internal timing. You stop asking when things will move again because you trust that movement will return when coherence is sufficient. This trust dissolves anxiety at its root. Control is no longer required to feel safe. Stillness holds until readiness is embodied rather than imagined. Attempts to force clarity fail because clarity cannot be rushed into existence. The spiral protects the system from premature orientation. Stillness acts as a buffer that prevents half-formed identity from solidifying into distortion. When movement finally begins to reappear, it does so without announcement. There is no surge, no revelation, just availability. Action feels possible without pressure. Direction feels present without demand. The next step does not feel dramatic. It feels obvious. This is how aligned movement always returns. The movement that follows stillness is quieter, but stronger. It does not require validation. It does not seek acceleration. It holds under complexity because it is not compensating for misalignment. Stillness ensures that motion resumes with integrity. Passion that survives stillness is no longer compulsive. It does not burn. It glows steadily. Desire becomes sustainable because it is no longer fueled by lack. Ambition becomes precise because it is no longer driven by fear. Stillness also leaves behind a lasting imprint. You carry the pause with you even as life accelerates. You learn how to stop internally without collapsing externally. You recognize when to wait and when to move. This discernment becomes part of your navigation rather than a phase you leave behind. The spiral uses stillness to prevent fragmentation during rapid evolution. It is not a retreat. It is a safeguard. A structural pause that preserves coherence so that becoming remains truthful. If you have moved through this depth of stillness, you are not empty. You are not disengaged. You are not behind. You are assembled with greater precision than before. When movement continues, it will not feel forced. It will feel clean. And you will recognize that the silence was not absence. It was alignment returning to itself.